Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're opening up a real mystery box on one of the most stubborn, seemingly impossible systemic problems in modern society. We're talking about the vicious cycle of homelessness, trauma, and community crime. For decades, institutions have just thrown endless clinical models and top-down policing strategies at this crisis, honestly, with frustratingly little to show for it. But what if I told you that an absolutely astonishing solution has emerged, and it didn't come from a fancy boardroom or a think tank, but from the very ground zero of the crisis itself? Let's kick things off with a massive number, -71%. I mean, that is a jaw-dropping figure. Think about it. How does a supportive housing community for veterans achieve a sudden, dramatic drop in crime of that magnitude? We aren't just talking about a gentle, downward trend here. We're talking about an absolute plummet in police investigations, assaults, and disturbances. The hard data behind that drop is just staggering. If we compare early 2024 to early 2025 across two Cloudbreak Communities properties, the Main Street location saw a highly impressive 33% overall drop in crime. That's great on its own. But the Travis property, a community specifically for formerly homeless veterans, saw its total offenses drop from 35 down to just 10. That's your 71% drop. Aggravated robberies, down 100%. Criminal trespassing, down 100%. This kind of transformation is, frankly, virtually unheard of in systemic social work. This shift was so profound, it earned official recognition, like a February 2026 Certificate of Appreciation from the City of Houston's Office of Veterans and Military Affairs, awarded to Cloudbreak Communities. But here's the real kicker. This wasn't the result of some aggressive new policing strategy. It wasn't a massive influx of funding or a rigid institutional crackdown. The catalyst for this unbelievable change was literally a 40-page document, an assessment tool. Section 1. The Architect. Celeste Martin. So to understand how a single document sparked such a revolution, we have to look at the person who built it. This shifts our story from a dry institutional outcome to a deeply personal hero's journey. Before we even discuss her methodology, her credibility is crystal clear. She received a 2023 congressional recognition honoring her as a Fallen Military Service Heroes and Heroes of the Pandemic honoree. Her drive and dedication were recognized at the highest levels of government. But you know, Celeste's authority doesn't just come from official certificates. It comes from a much deeper, much harder-earned place. Celeste Martin is a mental health peer support specialist whose work is fundamentally grounded in lived experience. She first arrived at US VATS back in November 2015 as a homeless veteran and a transgender woman. She intimately knew the realities of housing instability, gender-based targeting, and the sheer limits of service systems when complex needs are just ignored. She used her firsthand experience navigating these very systems to design a groundbreaking model. She lived the problem, which gave her the exact blueprint needed to design the solution. Section 2. Rethinking the Assessment. So how exactly did she translate her experience into the comprehensive well-being and stability assessment? Well, usually a 40-page intake form is just a highly effective way to put someone to sleep, or worse, make them feel like they're under interrogation. Traditional assessments often feature a clinician sitting safely behind a screen, checking boxes, diagnosing deficits, and pathologizing behavior. Celeste's framework completely flips the script. Her model is deeply collaborative. It focuses on empowering the participant and looking at environmental conditions rather than just individual flaws. It actually draws on theories like Urie Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model, which basically says a person's stability is heavily shaped by their environment, their safety, material resources, and institutional responses. But Celeste doesn't let her assessment get bogged down in abstract academic theories. She grounds it entirely in everyday reality. Her tool actively hunts down practical barriers. We're talking about concrete things here. Does the participant need help replacing a lost ID just so they can legally sign a lease? Are they living in a space with a dangerously cold, broken heater? Do they just need a reliable ride to the pharmacy to pick up their medication? Or maybe access to basic laundry and hygiene to maintain their dignity? These are the real-world friction points the assessment targets to prevent a crisis before it even begins. Section 3. The Stability Partner. Now, a tool is really only as good as the person using it, right? Enter the stability partner. This isn't a clinician, this is a peer. It's someone who works alongside the participant over time. They don't just swoop in for a one-time institutional intake and disappear. They build trust. Their job isn't to personally solve every single problem or manage the person's life, but to notice barriers, help prioritize next steps, and connect the participant to community resources. It completely shifts the dynamic from doing something to a participant to working alongside them. It's a real game changer. And this stability partner operates under a very specific set of rules. First, they start with triage. If there's immediate danger, a lack of food, or an urgent medical need, you pause the assessment and handle safety first. Second, they continue gradually. This isn't a race to fill out a form. You gather information naturally as trust develops. Third, you actively look for the participants' strengths and ways they can engage and reciprocal community support. And finally, you close every single contact with agreed, accountable next steps. Who's doing what and by when. It turns a standard conversation into a living roadmap.
Section 4. Fixing cascading failures. So how does this actually stop crime and stabilize a community? Well, it all comes down to stopping a chain reaction. A cascading failure happens when one simple, unmet practical need triggers a compounding series of disasters. Think about how a simple transportation barrier can lead to missed appointments. Those missed appointments lead to medication gaps. The medication gaps increase behavioral symptoms, and suddenly, out of nowhere, those symptoms put the person's housing and employment at severe risk. Celeste's tool is designed to catch the very first domino before it falls.
Let's see how this builds using the ABC model, which is borrowed from applied behavior analysis. The assessment traces the root causes of instability. A stands for antecedent, the condition before the crisis, like a lost ID, extreme paperwork overload, or unpaid rent. B is the behavior, the observable response, like emotional escalation, withdrawal, or missing an appointment. And C is the consequence, a lease violation, an arrest, or job loss. Think about it in your own life for a second. If you're highly stressed or reacting poorly, the behavior or consequence, it's usually because a practical hurdle, the antecedent, was missed or ignored. Traditional models punish the consequence. Celeste's model uses the stability partner to fix the antecedent, completely interrupting the cycle of disaster. Section 5. The power of lived experience. We're now seeing the true systemic impact of this peer-led housing-first design. When you combine lived experience with structured, trauma-informed care, you don't just change individual lives, you change entire communities. As a recent psychological review perfectly captured, quote, "It normalizes shared human experiences and shifts the dynamic from doing something to a participant to working alongside them." The review praised the tool for balancing clinical thoroughness with the strict, person-centered ethics of peer delivery. It actively protects human dignity and autonomy, proving just how groundbreaking this model truly is. And Celeste continues to lead by example on the ground, keeping her own practical skills sharp. For instance, she earned an American Red Cross CPR and AED certification in January 2025. She doesn't just sit back and write theory from an office. She maintains practical, life-saving skills to foster real community resilience. She fundamentally believes in mutual aid, that if one neighbor is suffering, the whole community feels it. But if they support each other, the whole community heals. Which brings us to our final thought. A formerly homeless transgender veteran designed a 40-page assessment that reduced crime in a vulnerable community by 71%, a feat traditional institutions failed to achieve for decades. So the question you should take away from this explainer is this: if lived experience solved what the system couldn't, who else out there are we currently failing to listen to?